Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining the latest in our series of exporter trainings. Today we're doing Africa. Africa, not including North Africa, as you'll see as we work through here. We will probably do a Middle East training combined with maybe another region, another date, and we combine both our market access and our marketing functions with North Africa with our Middle East. So looking forward to having you here today. This webinar is going to be a bit different than some of our other trainings, and that's because, sorry, I got phone calls coming in. This is because we just don't have a lot of regulatory information for most of our African countries. So I will cover the export library requirements, of which there are not very many for the continent. And then I will give most of the airtime today to Matt Copeland, who you see is on, who is our representative, and he's in market based in Durban, South Africa. So a lot of what we'll cover will be just our understanding, but as you guys know, with our guidance, we always defer back to the export library and we always defer to the importer, but hopefully he'll cover some things that if you get asked by an importer to do in regards to, say, French labeling or whatnot, you know, a lot of these are not out of the realm from what we understand the requirements to be. But again, this is a very unique market. It's very new to a lot of our exporters. A lot of these countries are new to US red meat imports in general. So it really is a learning process for all of us involved. So I think today will be educational on multiple fronts. A bit of housekeeping. Like I said, we are recording this. Questions will be taken at the end. I will moderate those. Please put those into the Q&A at any time through the presentation. And then, like I said, we'll cover those at the end. So, all right, without further ado, let's get into it. So like I said, I'll start, just cover from a regulatory standpoint what our access looks like, particularly in regards to the export library, and then I'll pass it over to Matt. So, all right. First and foremost, just a quick list. Obviously, it's a huge continent. There are many countries, and you'll see, again, that most countries, even that we ship to, are not listed within the export library. So the same rules apply. If a country is not listed within the export library, FSIS assumes nothing is known about that country. You ship at your own risk, but they will issue you a 9060-5 or the basic export certificate to ship there. But again, if you have questions on those markets, let us know. We typically reach out to the embassy in that country just to double check too. So quickly go through, I won't go through all of these, but it is not uncommon to have bilingual labeling requirements in some of these countries, as you will see. The two countries I highlighted in red, we have no access to. So these are really our only closed markets within sub-Saharan Africa, first of which being Namibia, second being Nigeria. We obviously know product flows into Nigeria, but unfortunately, we don't have direct access for any meat products or poultry into that country. We do have some pack date requirements you'd see, like on the Ivory Coast. Senegal requires pre-shipment testing, typically through places like SGS. So there are some stipulations to check there. Okay, so I'm going to spend a couple slides talking about South Africa. That's the country we know most about from a regulatory standpoint, and that's because access was negotiated on beef, pork, and poultry a few years ago through AGOA discussions. So we know more about what it takes to ship to this market, but it also tends to be a complicated market as well. So we'll kind of work through a few of these requirements. So first of which, eligible products, we don't cover poultry, as you know, so I won't get into that. Beef, for all intents and purposes, is totally open, all products eligible. Pork muscle cuts are eligible. Pork offals are not eligible. And then we'll talk about, we have 2 pork certificates, which is a totally unique process. We only have that within South Africa. So we'll talk a bit about what those 2 certificates look like. Other ineligible products would be hog casings, heat treated meat and poultry products. Negotiations go on these products, but again, USG negotiations with Dallard, who's the food safety agency in South Africa, are not always give you a lot of warm and fuzzy. So we have lots of things on the access list that we're trying to negotiate. So there are some things continuing here, but unfortunately it takes some time. So if I go through any of these products and you have interest specifically from the export or the import side, please always let us know, because we convey that information to USDA for those interested products. As I said, no pork offal access. We know that pork heart's a priority in this market. We are actively working on that with the National Pork Producers Council to see what some options look like there, because we know that that's a big market for heart specifically. Pork shoulder cuts for unrestricted use. We'll talk a bit about what unrestricted use looks like on the next slide, but for all intents and purposes, negotiations and understanding of what the requirements are to enter these products are unclear between our governments. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but I really consider them to be ineligible at this point due to continuing discussion there. Ionized meat, and then meat originating from a third country that you may either process and or re-export. Eligible establishments, we do have a plant approval process for South Africa. It's pretty, the process to start it is pretty simple. It's the 98-3 form, or through PHIS that you guys do for Mexico and some other countries. I encourage you, if you are, say, working with a new packer to supply product, or you are a new packer processor that hasn't worked with South Africa before, make sure and go check what your listing is. So we have a lot of establishments that are either not in existence anymore, or they've changed hands, because when we gained access a few years ago, FSIS just carried the old approved plant list over and started working off that. So you'll see that there are plants, like I said, that aren't even in existence anymore or have changed names. So it's very important, you know, in the eyes of USDA, that your establishment number, your name, your address, operation species, all aligns. So trying to ship under maybe an approved establishment, but if the name doesn't match up, that can cause issues on both sides of the ocean. So make sure and check that, especially say if you're a trader working with a new packer to the market, to make sure the listing is correct. So if you need to either approve a new plant or update a listing to, say, a new company name, the process used to be quicker. For whatever reason, it's just taking a lot longer. And like any plant approval process, you have to take in consideration just really the bureaucratic steps to get it done. So, you know, the plant submits the paperwork through their local inspector. The plant approval paperwork goes to district office. It goes to Washington. They write a letter that's delivered to the embassy in Pretoria. They deliver it to the agency in South Africa. We have to wait for the agency to respond. We have to wait for them to update their approved plant website. It comes back to Washington. We have to update the export library on this side. You guys know this. I say all this because if you are looking at this market, or you're looking, you know, for a potential packer partner to work in this market, please plan ahead. The approval lasts forever unless some issue happens. We haven't had any delistings for South Africa in the years since we've had access, but just if there's any interest, it doesn't hurt to get them on the list. Start working through that process, because something that used to just take a month now can take 4 to 8 months or longer, just getting it through the process. So please do not call me and say we need to be approved next week, because that's just not something any of us can get done. So please plan ahead if you're looking to get on this list or make any edits. Okay, talk a little bit about documentation. So beef, like I said, we pretty much have full access for all products, 96-5, the basic export certificate, and then there is a letterhead certificate. No crazy attestations there that you need to sign off on. So pork, we have these two certificates, and essentially they're a restricted certificate and an unrestricted certificate. So restricted means that that product, when it goes to South Africa, has to be stored, be processed, be moved through approved cold storages, approved processing facilities, which we have in South Africa, but it really limits, potential customers, new buyers, and, it's an approval process for those facilities in the country as well. And then anything unrestricted, since it requires some type of processing, cannot go to retail. They can't go to, table meat for restaurants. So we're really limited to not only the processing sector, but a smaller pool of the processing sector. So that's the restricted certificate. And then the unrestricted certificate doesn't have to go to processor. It can't go to retail, doesn't have to move through approved facilities within South Africa, but there's only a certain list of cuts that can go in under that certificate. So this is all based on certain animal health requirements that South Africa has given us. I won't get into the details on that because I'm not a pork disease expert, but that's kind of the basis of how we ended up with 2 certificates here. So the unrestricted certificate, if you are getting interest from an importer on this, make sure and look at the list because there's only certain cuts that can go for unrestricted access. And you have to have some program within the plant to produce these items because there's a specific specification written within that document on what that cut needs to look like. But you also need to have a program to make sure there's no lymph nodes or excessive connective tissue in those products. So you'll look at that list and you'll see it's called Annex A, shoulder cuts. And that's the list I mentioned that if you look at the library, it would indicate we have access for those cuts. However, we worked with USDA to send a sample years ago when the market opened. And South Africa didn't accept it because there were internal lymph nodes in those shoulder cuts. So not only can you not have lymph nodes, but the cuts must be recognizable. So obviously, if you cut some of these cuts open to get all the internal lymph nodes, the cut is not recognizable. So you can ship things on this list, just ignore Annex A shoulder cuts or talk to us first. Like I said, we would consider those to not have access at this point. But there are other items on there, certain rib items, certain loin items, et cetera, that we do have access for. We've shipped ribs before. They've cleared with no issue. But again, you need to source from a plant that has some type of program to make sure they meet that South African spec as dictated in that link I have here. And then also, QA checking to make sure there's no lymph nodes or anything left on it, depending on the spec. So again, this gets pretty complicated and it's something we don't have for any other market in the world. So if you have interest in shipping pork cuts to South Africa, please let us know. And we're always happy to facilitate questions on that with, QA or the inspector or whatnot to make sure that you're shipping a compliant product. Okay, a few other documentation requirements for South Africa. Import permits are required. And the documents that FSI assigns, letterhead certificates, do require container, seal number, and shipping date. These are listed after FSIS signature. So FSIS doesn't verify this information. You can add this information after FSIS signs your letterhead certificate, but it has to be completed or you will face issues when you clear in whatever port in South Africa. So make sure that information is included. You will also have issues if your documents are signed after the product leaves the US. This is the case for many countries, so we always say best practices to have FSIS sign, date everything before sailing date to prevent issues on the other side. We also, right now in the eyes of South Africa, they don't allow transit product from the US. So like if you were shipping something to South Africa, but it, transshipped Egypt or somewhere else in West Africa first, right now that is not allowed with the South African agency, Dallard. So we understand that transshipment is common. before product gets to South Africa. This is something we're working on, but right now, just understanding that that will probably cause issues if that's something that you're looking into doing and moving product through another country before it lands in South Africa. We do have some micro requirements for South Africa, specifically salmonella. It's a zero tolerance on raw products. We don't agree with it. That's not how we handle salmonella in the US. Discussions continue there. But we luckily, knock on wood, haven't had a ton of issues in this, but we have had issues with positive salmonella tests and beef offal specifically. So it's something to be aware of. Talk to your importer. It's just something, you know, that you need to be cognizant of before shipping products there. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking about South Africa and I'm going to pass it to the expert, and I am going to let Matt start sharing his screen.
Thanks, Cheyenne. If you can pass it, that'll be cool. Thank you. Well, awesome, everyone. It's really good to be with you all. I know I have some friends in the audience, some other folk I've done work with in the past. It's a great privilege to be with you today. Obviously, I'm hugely excited about this market. I'm excited that you folk are interested in it. And Cheyenne's kind in terms of in-market experts. I think I'm lucky in that this is my home. I've lived only here and a short stint overseas in New Zealand playing a bit of rugby. And for my sins, I've shipped I think well over 500,000 tons of different product from different ports in West Africa and all the way up East Africa. I'm fortunate to have participated in a lot of dry goods before coming into the meat sector in 2013. And in terms of my background, I'm qualified in marketing and economics, and I have the ability to trade on our Johannesburg Stock Exchange in terms of commodity derivatives. So I understand a little bit about agri-trading. I'm very blessed to have worked with a bunch of fantastic companies out of the US since 2011. And before that, I worked for some German folks. So just to let you know that a lot of what we've learned in time is also through the School of Hard Knocks. I've bumped my heads at many ports. I've had to visit so many different tragic situations to try and rectify trade. And I think hopefully you'll take away Africa is an incredibly exciting market to participate with. It's also a place that unfortunately does offer some curveballs, and we have to be adept and we have to be contingency planning continually. So
hey Matt,
Africa is exciting.
Oh, I was just gonna say, if you click share screen, you should be able to share now.
Okay, thank you. Can you see that slide?
Not yet. Or I can share from my side too, I think, Matt, if you want to just tell me to click through. You want me to do that?
Yeah, it's okay. Cool. Thanks, Sean. Sorry about this.
Oop. Keep talking, I'll work on it. Sorry, it's our technology. But
yeah, for the most part, today, I know that in our audience, we have a diverse spectrum of folk who are interested. Some folk who I know from our old team, documentary experts, and understand these flows very well. Some other folk maybe on the marketing side, some other folk obviously trade representatives or traders into these markets. So I'm hoping on a very top level, we'll cover things that are interesting for all of us to ensure that we do add value. And also you can see a little bit about the way I analyze trade, some of the layered filters we put onto the way we formulate trade into these markets so that we don't take unnecessary risks. And then obviously, as well, some of the success stories and also some of the troubleshooting issues. I have a few examples from my past where we've had issues and we've had to resolve them and how we've gone about doing that.
Okay, you should be seeing the slides, right? You see them from your side, Matt?
I can't. I'd love to be on slide number 2 if possible.
You're on slide 2.
Okay. Would you mind hitting that video then, Cheyenne? So in the past, we had very skewed views, and obviously this is an in situ situation. This is a bicycle that's been remodeled. That takes 2 tons of product. It's between the Copperbelt in Zambia and the Congo, so Lubumbashi. And the reason why I included it in today's presentation is just to say, look, you know, in our mindset is if this is what we only see as the African market, we do have quite a lot to learn. Africa is advancing at incredible speeds. We have investment in infrastructure here. If you were coming to South Africa and look at stores and some of our counterparts like Murloc Foods, for example, they have robotic algorithm-driven cold stores that human hands don't touch unless you're just dispatching and signing out cargo into their smaller trucks. That resource in terms of meeting some of the South African companies at the moment, and we're hoping to grow this library base out from here, is available on that link, usmefafrica.com. But I think let's go into some of the probably more westernized store environments that we'll see on slide number 3. Thanks, Shane.
You're good to go. Slide 3.
Yeah, and you can click that video as well. Well, thank you. So these branded butchery chains, some of them retail environments, ShopRite, for example, are mammoth, a behemoth of the company. I think they employ over 140,000 people in SADC in West Africa. They have over 2,400 corporate stores, another 500 type franchisee stores. So that's almost 3,000 stores just in their store cluster that they are directly responsible for. The reason why I bring them up is as USMEF, we try and promote with businesses like this who are already hugely successful on the continent to make sure that we're getting jab orders into their group, or we're leveraging, you know, some of our promotional spend to mean that our members get access to orders directly. So we have conditions that they have to meet. But to let you know, Pick n Pay, Spar, Boxer Superstores, they're all environments that will look very much similar to these Chester butcheries that I've just shown you. And these are all companies that have the highest standards in food safety that, you know, in the past, we used Africa as a dumping ground, and we have legacy issues around that. So, you know, there's a lot of trust issues, and it's probably one of the most vital parts about building relationships here is that everything, in fact, is built on trust now. And people, the same all over the world, people are what make these markets shift, and what make these markets successful is partnering with the right businesses. So I think just for ourselves, you know, the standard of that in-store environment, the promotional spend required to participate in some of these marketing exercises with the likes of ShopRite or Woolworths or Food Lovers Market. So, you know, those are really expensive exercises, and they're big investments to make decisions around. And I know we're mainly thinking with a trading hat on today, but certainly in time, you'll see marketing spend follow some of the trade that is successful into this market from the US. We'll see some programs developed, I think, in the White Cow sector coming into more premium offerings on shelf. And then again, in Africa, for a very long time, offals are going to be absolutely pivotal because we need superfood nutrition, and we need it as as cost effective a price point as we can get. And literally, beef liver, as an example, offers incredible an incredible solution for our continent at the moment. Shane, if we can go. So another phenomenon that's happening all over the continent is obviously we have a lower measure in terms of income standards. So living standard of measures, probably folk that originally are in 2, 3, and 4 that are emerging to 3, 4, 5, and 6. But this is an incredible opportunity. So as this slide says, the informal business sector, it's the next great frontier. And literally, if you're following any demographic predictions around our continent, you know, in the West, we see population numbers, you know, flat or declining. In the East, Oriental East, we see those numbers climbing probably 10, 15% by 2100. India is also on a growth curve, probably something similar to that. But if you look at Africa from the year 2010 to the year 2100, we literally double. And we're going to create some feeding issues that are going to be wonderful commercially to solve. So it's great that Africa is on your radar already, but just understand as well, we're going to have so many more mouths to feed. And a part of the protein matrix that we produce in the US is certainly going to be flexed to make sure that we can fill some of those holes. And we're doing research into last mile, we're doing research into some of the markets we aren't even in yet, to try and understand, hey, once we gear into those markets, some of the big ones like Nigeria, etc., can we hit the ground running? And the answer will be yes. Okay, you can go. So again, people are the pillars of our markets, relationships, trust. These are the two drivers into any trade, but specifically into Africa, because, you know, we have some of our own histories here. It hasn't always been the most easy place to play. It isn't so transparent. Information isn't as really available as some of the other parts of the world. Tongue in cheek, people still come here to dive with great white sharks, and commercially, I think the experience can be pretty similar if you don't kind of give it your full attention. And in terms of, again, setting up and conceptualizing the trade, if we don't have our risk matrices right, this place is potentially where we can swim the sharks. Again, Monty and I, in terms of developing trust with the industry here, we've been in and around this market for a long time, and we've had some good success here. So really, we want to offer the best assistance that we can in market too. And at the same time, we want you to understand that we're still learning. But here in Africa, you also have amazing opportunities where, you know, leveraged money, it's trading at a different speed. Inflation is happening at a different speed. So food costs are slightly different. So we still have some gaps that mean real opportunity for traders into this space. Thanks, Shane. So again, trust and relationships are the essence of all markets. Our recommendation is to take measures to increase visibility here. Variety meats, as I've said, will always be a massive staple: beef, liver, hearts, kidneys. And we're seeing more inquiries, and we have sausage manufacturing throughout SADC countries. We have something called boerewors, which translates into farmer's sausage, and we have another product, which is a braaiwors. Legally, it allows all sorts of products into that mix. And so head meat, lips, tongue roots from beef, etc. We just see increased demand for that kind of product. We're getting more inquiries from the trade in South Africa. So just to be cognizant of that. As consumers become more educated, we see them moving up in terms of quality. Obviously, some of the white cow programs out of the US, there's intramuscular fat that's developed here. We're slaughtering a really young animal in country in South Africa, and in basically Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, so the neighboring countries as well. So what it means is on shelf, that white cow program with the snow that's been thrown through it, even though it's a slightly older animal, it's going to eat really differently to the stuff that's on shelf here. It looks very different. We have Wagyu genetics in country that's starting to make its way onto shelf. So we can just see that suddenly there's going to be a price point that means more US product can shift into this market. So we're very excited about that. As I mentioned, some of the other research that's taking place in places like Kenya and Nigeria, where we know we aren't geared perfectly just yet, but we are looking into it. So we're going to go again. So that slide represents Africa, obviously. Wherever you see our logo, it's where we're participating or where we're doing research currently. I've left Nigeria blank because we're a little bit way off, but in terms of Kenya, we've participated in some trade shows, some online trade shows there, and we're taking the first steps to try and understand exactly where the opportunities lie. But for the most, obviously Namibia excluded, we see further demand. I can't explain the shortness of this market for beef offal. South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Angola short as well. So we just see kind of more and more opportunities, and for us to capitalize on those, obviously we need to make sure that you guys feel supported as well as don't feel at complete risk coming into these markets. So let's go again, Cheyenne. Thanks. So these risk considerations, in terms of the way I see the trade, I could talk all day, literally, in this environment about how to conceptualize the trade, considering risks into the African market, understanding that a lot of the counterparties traditionally are slightly weaker from a cash flow point of view than some of the other regions of the world. So whenever we lock in a trade or we commit to a contract, we have some sort of underlying market risk, some market movement in terms of timing. So, for example, the time it takes for someone to actually be able to tell you from Angola, we're going to be able to give you that money in time. Between them doing a deal with you and coming up with the funds, obviously you're exposed to elements of risk. And I know everyone has a different risk appetite, and some folk won't necessarily have that on their radar in terms of their function in the business. But I think what I want to stress out of this is, if we have contingency plans, if we analyze all the risks to the nth degree, what we'll do is we'll have more success more frequently in Africa, and we'll have less high drama. And I think those are the big and nasty surprises that we're trying to avoid. So in terms of counterparty risk, we can hedge some of that. In terms of payment risk, well, some of the trades into the US are dog-legged out of first-class banks. So it's an African bank confirming to Europe, and Europe back to the United States. That's very common. So we can take some of the sting out of availability in country at the time. Obviously, there's FX risks because of the volatility of some of these emerging markets, and there's an abnormal play in some of them. The Rand is one of those that we're exposed to. And obviously, we also need to make sure that our counterparties are hedging that Forex risk for themselves adequately. In terms of contingency planning, I've seen product shipped in the past. We had solutions for product that was stuck in Alexandria. It could come down to Durban, and it could certainly get through. Now we have issues over the last year developing where that transshipment gap has been closed. So there are other things now to consider in terms of where we'll go with a container if we have a container rejected, and those sorts of things we need to give a little bit more attention to, particularly if we're trading routes like Benin. I know it's been open for a while, but if it shuts immediately, then obviously that will also put us under a little bit of risk, under pressure. In terms of resolution, obviously analyzing the actual situation with people on the ground, if you're going to take risk in Africa, my recommendation is to invest in really good people who can assist. There are some terrific folk who can make some of these teething problems a lot more smooth. And some of the rejections, like what Cheyenne was saying, we might have a rejection that's absolutely legitimate. And then how do we resolve it? Or if there's just a documentary issue, how do we resolve that in the best course so that we don't have unnecessary penalties and that sort of thing? And I think those are things that really we can help with if we get involved early enough. But the other side is just to let you know that, in South Africa, although it seems at times like, vets are anti, or it seems like trade is slightly negative. If you looked at the total volume of product that's shifting into this market, including MDM out of Brazil, etc., those numbers are, into the 30,000 plus tons of product per month into this sector. I mean, just in our beef liver, 1,600, 1,700 tons is a really good month. But, I think April we had some cracker numbers, and it was recovering from the Texas freeze. But just be aware, I mean, all of that product coming in here is not at risk. The same in the Angolan market. In terms of that market has developed poultry market, and off the back of that, all the cold chain that is subsequently developed, those aren't massively risky plays. It's just, how do I get my money out in time? Have I crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's to make sure it happens? And then obviously demurrage is something that we can talk about. I think COVID and just the movement of equipment around the world has changed this thing, this environment massively. But I just to say, we used to get paid massive cabotage rates from West Africa, repositioning boxes onto trade lanes from South Africa back to the east, to India and to China. So all of that fell away fairly briefly into COVID, or fairly swiftly into COVID. And since then, we've just, obviously everyone's just seen freight climbing, and it's been an absolute nightmare. But the reason for bringing it up is you still need to fight for 3 days. You absolutely have to ask whoever's managing those contracts with the lines to beg, borrow, and still fight, because in Africa, you're still going to have some sorts of delays. The example that I've listed here is off of a trade we used to do into Mombasa, and we used to have to start that trade pricing in huge costs of demurrage, because we just knew that port was going to be an absolute nightmare. So hopefully, and I know we don't, a lot of the meat trades, we don't start on the back foot like that, but it's just something to consider, that these markets can get super technical. And if you have folk in country or in the market giving you news, I just think that you're going to be really well off, and you shouldn't be punished unnecessarily for any small potential errors. Okay, Shane? So my next slide, I don't want to come across condescending or no at all in any matter, and please, I just, in terms of risk, I think, a lot of people have learned to talk really well. So some of us at the trade shows will be engaged with counterparties who really can speak the speak, they can walk the talk, they can do it all. But, when the rubber hits the road, are they going to be effective? And I just think for all of us, in terms of how do we lay off some of this risk? How do we get some perspective that isn't our own only? I think, just as a suggestion, people like Coface, AIG, Euler Hermes, Altradius, Credit Guarantee Insurance Company in South Africa, those are companies who are analyzing trade. They are helping people build risk parameters into their business every second of the day. So my tiny bit of advice is obviously, keep your account manager on your risk underwriting portfolio like as close as you can, and then maybe one or two others that we can use from time to time, or even invest in some of the reports out there, Standard & Poor's or someone like that over a company. In the old days, we thought, look, we'll just roll the dice here. But I think, as hopefully you can hear from me, it's just as things become more risky and more tight in terms of the loopholes that we all have to jump through, and also it's actually good in the way. So we're tightening up on food safety and those things. I think there's less room for kind of complete speculative plays, and I think that will serve your businesses in a better way in the long run as well. So, okay, Cheyenne. So here's a big one for me, the vets, they are dealing with so many problems in our different ports, and I'm going to speak transparently about a chapter from my past life, but there is a time when it can make sense for you as a trader or you as the packer or shipper to go, hey, I actually need to invest a lot more time in resolving this. This particular example from my side was 6 containers. It was of chicken deboned thigh meat, and the issue was the inspector had it as unrecognizable. Now, possibly to his eye, it was unrecognizable. I think from my side, we we then had to start to develop, look, that's, you can imagine how much expense if we had to condemn all of that product. And from a food safety point of view, it's absolutely produced in some of the best environments in the world, like we do in the US. It's completely sound and wholesome, completely nutritious. And the way my brain works is like, there's no ways I'm going to let the end consumer not participate in getting this towards them and having this product destroyed. Just in terms of waste, particularly in Africa, we can't afford that sort of thing. So, gently, I asked, for a little bit of help to help them and to help us understand process better in the way that product is produced, and eventually for them to see actually there's no ways that product could have come from any other part of the chicken than exactly what the product was described at, whether it wasn't thought out properly and the product was teared when it was being thawed. And those are all things that can happen in country. But just to let you know, that was probably 300 or 400 emails later, very gentle from all aspects that are involved, speaking to some of the folk at FAS at the time, absolutely, that are involved, speaking to Zelda at the time, absolutely. And so all I'm trying to say is occasionally you're going to have to be able to dig in yourself and go, actually, I need to be able to step in here and get some advice from FAS. All of these things I would not have done if I knew it was going to be disastrous to a relationship. That's not why we're here. We're here for the long haul. We're here for the long run, and we're building trust when we interact. So it's not a short-term gain ever. But what that kind of thing did, and the gentleness with which we approached the market, is it's actually given me standing with them. So, I can phone into that agency now and they know I'm not doing it for private gain. I'm not doing it for selfish gain. Actually, I think there's a fair result here that actually would suit both parties. And we're not trying to get them to shift on any of their kind of rules or regulations. We want those enforced, but we want them enforced fairly. And so sometimes we're going to have to fight for our own fairness. That's just an example. Okay, Cheyenne. So again, in terms of the markets that you'll be shipping to from West Africa, obviously we have Cote d'Ivoire, Benin, Togo, where French is very well spoken. Benin, Nigeria exists as well. In Ghana, obviously we have English. Nigeria, we have a mix of languages. Down to Cameroon, back to French, down to Angola, where it's Portuguese, Namibia, where they still speak Afrikaans, as well as there's even German spoken. So into South Africa, and then up the eastern coast, again, we have Portuguese in Mozambique, and then further up into some of the other markets, we even have Arabic being spoken, So just to help you understand what we can do to avoid any drama, to my mind, is one of the key things is when you're putting on a label for destination country, make sure that label speaks to the person who's going to be inspecting that cargo at a port. And eventually it's going to be, that carton is going into the back of an organization. It needs to be very simply read. And then from there, if there's any other labeling inside the pack, maybe it's vacuum, it's RWP, whatever it is, that needs to be legible in their own language to the consumer. And it's rule of thumb for me. Obviously, some of the absolute binding law we take from the export library is, hey, we have to get this right. But I want to just speak practically. If you're shipping potentially to South Africa and you need to maybe have a layoff trade into another market because there's any risk attached to that container, you'd be well advised to have English, Portuguese, and French on there coming to these markets, because you're not always going to be able to solve the solution in the market that you intended it for. And yes, Alpha is to ship back to the US, but again, that's hugely costly. And if it isn't against a health and safety risk to the consumer, if it's absolutely fair product and wholesome, then I think there are other solutions that you need to consider. But you won't be able to get that product shifted if you have errors in terms of labeling. So Arabic only is going to be, it's not going to be allowed into South Africa. You're going to have other potential issues, for example. So that's just a consideration. It was just something I wanted to bring up. If you are in any doubts at all, please speak to your counterparty, the company who are historically importing that product. They will have copies, or they can take a photo of cartons that have been successfully, hey, these are the languages that, and it was absolutely fine through the port. get them to take pictures and send those to you, just to make it very plain, because we can avoid some hard drama later by just solving some of that. Okay, Shane? Yeah, for everyone, this is a very important slide. I don't want to go into every single country specific, because unfortunately I've been out of trading actively for now probably 19, 20 months. I know Gabon recently had their access updated into January. So there is a style of approaching these trades that means we won't make mistakes. So the destination requirements from our counterparty, the destination requirements, obviously, in terms of like the agency in South Africa, Dallard, or who the counterparty, their pack, we can happily ask for a copy of a past document pack. You know, it's irrelevant in terms of values, trade. We don't even, I mean, they can scratch off on the bill who the counterparties to the trade were. But what that will do is it will give you the document pack that you need to make sure that you're at peace in terms of shipping into these places. So pre-in shipments and obviously the legal document, the CNCA certificate into Angola is slightly different. It's not actually a pre-inspection; it's a legal document allowing the right of passage into or tarry into Angola. So the DU obviously imported license from, and sometimes those are difficult to get, and the government stops issuing them for their own reasons. So these are all elements of a trade that's Angola specific. Obviously, Cotecna to Congo, BVAC into other Congo, Intertech into Gabon, and obviously Cheyenne brought up SGS, and there's all sorts of Ghana pre-shipment inspection has been passed, which is good. We don't have to do that anymore. But just make sure that we have that, and make sure that if it's a risky trade, that we have an option and some sort of potential that, hey, I can get this product. If it doesn't go there, I can shift it to somewhere where it can still get in. And that is all a part of the way we play, you know, the matrix around, you know, who we need to check these products before they're shipped. Obviously, the validity of the health certificate, are the details accurate from our side? The import permits, the expiry dates on those import permits. We've had problems into a few different markets when the import permits are incorrect in terms of exact timing. Labeling requirements, and we can go into obviously expiry dates actually in the cargoes listed. You know, again, is the shelf life preserved long enough for the accepting country to be satisfied that that product is wholesome and intended for the right purpose for their customers? We're trying to give the African market peace when we ship here. We're not just trying to take advantage of cash. And so over time, you'll have many more successful trades, obviously making sure that these gear really well. Obviously, Cheyenne, the 9060-5 is what we get away with mostly in terms of requirements. Places like Mozambique, who don't necessarily stipulate, you will still need that. Again, you will need Portuguese labeling, because that's obviously how all of their commercial trade is done. Even in courts, if you're going to fight in Mozambique, you're going to do that in Portuguese. So I think hopefully from what I've shared with you so far today is Africa is a really amazing place, you know, with technology and with communication and the way the speed of change takes place around the world. We're fortunate in that Africa, yes, we've started probably, you know, the race way behind the leaders, etc., technologically and for all other sorts of reasons, education-wise. But the difference is now we'll be fixing some of these problems and we'll be solving them faster than anyone else has ever solved problems in the world. So in that respect, I want to commend you guys for obviously being interested, but also for shipping already. I know a lot of you guys are hugely successful in my markets already. But again, it's also making sure that those filters, the risk matrices, and the way we conceptualize these trades are actually spot on, so that we can benefit from the long run. And if you do that well, you'll find some incredibly loyal companies here. They might be difficult to trade with. Obviously, places like South Africa are a natural arbitrage for Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, Europe, South America, and North America. So you're going to be dealing with traders who are astute. They understand what it's like to play in the shadows, and they also understand market movements on a daily basis, and they have very good insights into price fluctuations, and probably better in some cases than even the originator of product in the US, because you're hearing stories of maybe the markets moved in the Philippines and Brazilian MDM, but actually the South Africans will be seeing it. They'll be seeing offers overnight, through the night. Hey, that has shifted. Well, would MST or would MSC out of the US suddenly work? Or beef liver, as an example, UK and Ireland, they need some market share here. Australia, New Zealand, they need some market share here. US, we've done really well to capture a whole bunch of market share here, but obviously the others are still quite hungry, and we're seeing that pricing on a daily basis. So also, again, just to be aware of, to be successful here, it takes a huge amount of commitment to also acknowledge what are the other plays. So my West African folk, if there's any pork, or if there's pork going to the Congo, who are they potentially buying that through? What other channels are is a problem in Germany? Is that going to open a door for me on the day? Those simple arbitrage questions are super relevant here and really fun from the trade side to solve. So I think, yeah, again, Monty and myself are available as a resource. We'd like to help if we can. Obviously, one of the ways that I drive on the demand side is to partner with the retailers and wholesalers and some of the importers in country. And we set, a promotional spend, and as a result, they'll do jab orders into their group, and they'll be sourcing that from, they'll just have to show me that originally it's US product, etc. But just to let you know, our agenda is to absolutely make sure you benefit from what we can see here. And again, we want to support you guys in the markets where we're active. So we're doing a little bit here in South Africa. We're doing some stuff in the neighboring countries with some of the big retailers, which you'll see over the next 6 months to a year play out, and then Angola as well, and then obviously up in West Africa, a few little plays. We are slowly catching monkeys up there as well. So I just wanted to thank you for your time listening to me. Thank you for your support for our region. In closing, in my last slide, I'm just going to show you, this is a national campaign on television, DSTV in South Africa. So this video is set to reach a whole bunch, I'm saying millions of consumers. We can go for it, Shane.
Okay. Anything else, Matt?
No, not from my side. Did that video play, Shane? Sorry, I couldn't share.
It did, yeah, but it's playing
Okay.
on my side, but yeah, it sounds like folks aren't seeing it.
Okay.
So we may have to, when we email out the slides, we'll try and get those videos in there so they can see them.
Cool.
So, okay, perfect. It doesn't look like we have any questions in the Q&A. If you guys do have any of those, send them in. I have a question for you, Matt, not to put you on the spot. So since we've gained beef access to South Africa, I can't remember, 5 or 6 years ago, it's become our #2 beef variety market, our #2 liver market behind Egypt, who's still taking the vast majority, but that's very important because due to our market access issues, we've realized we cannot be reliant on livers to Egypt, just like we couldn't be reliant on livers to Russia, as we found out. So is there a preference, a commercial preference? When we started shipping livers to South Africa, there was discussion on the Australians pack them this way, they do this size of boxes. Is there a commercial preference for what South African buyers want to see in regards to our liver packing, like wax lined, poly, how many livers per box? Is there anything that you hear requested often?
Yeah, sure. So gold standard traditionally was the IWP 2 in a box from Australia. And as a result, in the past, it used to fetch a premium. When we first started shipping product into the market, we were taking a $30 to $60 discount per ton. And those were on quite modest prices of between $640 and $750, $800 at the time. Now, everyone on this call knows, you know, we've doubled those numbers in terms of the gains to the packer, in terms of these offal cuts. COVID has been terrible in a number of ways in terms of price support and demand for excellent nutrition at entry level kind of participation. Prices have been forced around the world. So at the moment, I think you're shipping in at $1,450 to probably $1,600 a ton. So in terms of that, my long answer to your question, Cheyenne, is in the past it was far more important because we had all of the power was on the demand side. And now we've seen a massive shift to all of the power being on the supply side as more and more folk are looking for really high quality US product. So long answer to your question, obviously IWP 2 box is preferred, but we've got great product from the West Coast that comes, the West Coast US that comes in here. We've got all sorts of stuff from Texas or Georgia. I mean, a lot of brands have gained a lot of traction here, and I think that was one of the efforts that I wanted to express as well. There are ways of partnering with key channels, I think, in a clever way to make sure that you kind of have that sort of market share gain and repetitiveness that you want in terms of planning on in your sales if you're fetching the right price. Hopefully that answers your question, Cheyenne. Yeah.
No, it does. Thank you. And we have another packaging question from Bob, and then I'm going to get to Dave's shelf life question. Okay, Matt. So most of the European, Canadian, and Brazilian product going to South Africa is packed in 10 kg boxes. Is this preferred, or can they accept 30-pound boxes as well?
Yeah, so I can give you practical examples. You're right. 10 kilo boxes they were preferred, and it's from a saleability point of view. But 13.75 is no issue at all. How we know that is on the turkey trade from the US. Most of that is shipped that way. So certainly it shouldn't be an issue at all. And I've seen some bigger boxes come in. I think the only place I've had pushback on some of the very big boxes has been out of Angola. So I think just be slightly cautious there. But 15 kilo, although it's not it's not preferred, I'll put it this way, absolutely, we can still handle the product really well. So yeah, no, it shouldn't be an issue.
Okay, thank you. All right, and it looks like our last question is, can shelf life go to 18 months or 2 years? So are countries, that require expiration date labeling or some type of, reference to that, as it's common for a lot of our exporters to do 1 year on frozen. But are there any countries that have issues going beyond that?
Look, there are, out of the top of my head, I wouldn't like to say, safely, we always look at a year from production, and I'd be happy to trade that product personally. I wouldn't feel like I was taking too much risk. 18 months, I think you'll get away with. I think at 2 years, you start to get into a gray area. So I can try and find that out. I just know that in terms of even South Africa, I think they don't stipulate that as explicitly. But what's food safe is obviously the main driver there. So I think probably a year from production is kind of what was expected. Have I seen product trade that's longer than? Yes. Have I seen product shift well that's over 2 years? Definitely not. I've seen that rejected. I've seen stuff between 18 months and 24 months rejected. So, again, those are plays that are possible. I think just pick your counterparty really well. Someone who's a problem solver in terms of the destination market, someone who's happy to take some of that risk on your behalf, then I think you're going to have less problems. And I think that you can stipulate in contracts as well. So I think manage your contracts more closely if you have to be so anxious around sell-by date issues. obviously we know someone's going to be under pressure, and for that, so hopefully we can pass off some of the risk.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, we have specific shelf life stipulations in Egypt, but I'm not aware of any that are formalized as far as the length for the rest of Africa. So it's probably if it comes up country by country, we can ask. But like you said, a lot of that tends to be a commercial decision.
Exactly. And then just to, obviously, I think this was a great success story, but that 7-month shelf life from Egypt to 10-month extension, that's been brilliant, for pricing out of the US. It's been super buoyant. And then obviously arbitrage from there, it helps those sellers of product fetch a lot higher prices, excuse me. So again, I want to see any loopholes closed so we can see the Alex leg shifting back down to South Africa, no problem. I think in time, hopefully we'll get that back on the card. So we are obviously aware of it. We're trying to make sure that everyone else is also pulling in the same direction. But I think for the market, that was a really good solution from a timing point of view. Yeah.
Okay, and one more question came in. Are even weight boxes preferred?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. For a number of reasons, it's not that. I mean, I won't get into the specifics of the customer because I'll give too much away. But a couple of the companies in South Africa are actually saying, look, in terms of the barcode style that you use on your own stickers when you're doing the labeling, we want to make sure that it's in this format. So they're scanning your barcode as if it's their own on inception at the back door in South Africa. So in terms of that, whatever information's in there, they can put on their system. So it's actually more fluid, far more flexible. But rudimentarily, if we are concerned one day that that product's going to shift from South Africa up through Zimbabwe into Zambia, and it's going to make a journey on a 2-ton bicycle, I think those people counting containers would really love even weight boxes. So, again, preferred, yes, but your contracts can manage that quite easily. And South Africans, the Angolans, Gabon, they'll be able to. Mozambique, certainly, I've shipped product there that wasn't that was catch weight. So, yeah.
Okay, that looks like all of our questions, and we're about right on time. So that worked out well. So we're going to go ahead and finish up. We will send the slides. Hopefully you can see the videos. We'll make sure and sort that out so you can see them when you watch later. The recording will be posted with all of our other exporter trainings. And yeah, please let Matt or I know if you have any questions, and we'll always welcome feedback on the seminars and countries of interest that you guys would like more intel on. So appreciate it. I'm going to let Matt finish up his Friday afternoon. And the rest of us in the US will get back to work. So appreciate everyone taking time. And
yeah, thanks so much, Cheyenne, and thank you to everyone who's participated today. I hope I've helped. And please, if you do need any assistance, you're welcome to reach me via email or my phone anytime. Cheyenne, thank you. I'm going to take license. I'm not going to rush for beers just yet, but thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.